Big news out of the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice of the United States of America just issued a rare statement on President Trump's call to impeach the judge in his Alien Enemies Act case. I want to go straight to Paula Reed. Paula, wow, this is a very big deal.
This is a huge deal. Here you have Chief Justice John Roberts appearing to push back on statements President Trump made earlier today, suggesting that a judge, James Boasberg, who of course temporarily blocked deportations by the Trump administration, or at least tried to, should be impeached. And here the Chief Justice writes, "For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose."
Adam here. What's up, guys? There are moments in American history that define presidencies, moments that separate normal political conflict from something darker, moments when the guardrails of democracy either hold or buckle under the weight of a leader who refuses to accept that anyone can tell him no. We just lived through one of those moments, and if you haven't fully grasped what happened between Donald Trump, a federal judge named James Boasberg, and Chief Justice John Roberts, you need to stop everything and pay attention.
We have some breaking news now. The Supreme Court Chief Justice is speaking out after President Trump called for a judge to be impeached. That federal judge is demanding the government explain why it ignored his order blocking the deportations of more than 200 alleged gang members. President Trump posted on social media calling for the judge to be impeached, saying he's radical left lunatic, a troublemaker, and agitator. Now Chief Justice John Roberts is responding. Senior Washington correspondent Devin Dwyer joins me now. Devin, justices normally stay out of anything remotely political. So how significant is it to hear from the Chief Justice on this?
This is an extraordinary development, Diane, and a sign just how big this case has become. And let's not forget that until recent times, it was also highly unusual for presidents to attack sitting judges hearing cases involving them. But of course, Donald Trump has made that the norm. And now for the second time, Chief Justice John Roberts, first time back in 2018, responding directly to the President of the United States.
Because this isn't just another Twitter rant. This isn't just Trump being Trump. This is a constitutional crisis playing out in real time, with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court publicly rebuking a sitting president for the first time in modern memory. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, why it matters, and why the impeachment pressure building in Congress just got a whole lot more serious. It starts with Judge James Boasberg. He's a federal district judge in Washington, D.C., appointed by Barack Obama, which means Trump has already decided he's illegitimate before he even reads a ruling.
Here's what Donald Trump said. This radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator who was sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, was not elected president. He went on to say, "I'm just doing what the voters wanted me to do. This judge, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached." Now, before we continue our conversation, I just want to add another layer to this, which is, remember what Donald Trump said just on Friday, which was, I don't know, what, four days ago, when he was at the Justice Department about a different judge.
We had an amazing judge in Florida, and her name is Eileen Cannon, and I didn't know her. I still don't know her. I don't believe I ever spoke to her, even during the trial. But I did appoint her, federal judge, and these fake lawyers, these horrible human beings, were hitting her so hard, public relations-wise. They were playing the ref. I don't think it's legal. I don't think it's legal.
But here's the thing about Boasberg. He's not some firebrand activist. He's a respected jurist who has served for over a decade. He's the kind of judge who rules based on the law, not based on who appointed him. And on March 13, 2026, he issued a ruling that sent shockwaves through the Trump administration. The case involved DOJ subpoenas against Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The Trump Justice Department had been demanding documents, demanding testimony, treating the independent Federal Reserve like it was a criminal enterprise. And Boasberg looked at the evidence, or rather the complete lack of evidence, and made a finding that is absolutely devastating. Zero evidence of any crime by Powell or the Federal Reserve. Zero. But Boasberg didn't stop there. He went further. He wrote in his ruling that the administration was using subpoena power not for law enforcement, but to pressure Powell into resigning. Political intimidation dressed up in legal clothing. A sitting federal judge, looking at the conduct of the executive branch, concluding that they were abusing their power to try to force out the head of an independent institution. Let that sink in for a moment. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be independent for a reason. Monetary policy cannot be controlled by whoever happens to be in the White House. If presidents could set interest rates based on political calculations, we'd see rates drop before every election and spike afterward, destroying economic stability and making the dollar a joke on the global stage. The independence of the Fed is one of the pillars of American economic credibility, and Trump has been attacking that pillar for years, publicly berating Powell for not lowering rates fast enough, demanding changes, and now, according to a federal judge, using the Justice Department as a weapon to try to force Powell out. That ruling alone would have been a massive story, but it's what happened next that pushed this into constitutional crisis territory. Trump went nuclear. He took to social media and called for Boasberg's impeachment. He called him a radical left lunatic judge. He wrote that Boasberg should be impeached. And then he added the line that should terrify anyone who believes in the rule of law. He did not win the election. Did not win the election. Think about what that phrase actually means. Trump is saying that because Boasberg wasn't elected by voters, he has no legitimate authority to rule against the executive branch. Under this theory, only elected officials can check presidential power. Judges? They're just unelected bureaucrats who should know their place. This is not an insult. This is a constitutional philosophy, and if accepted, it would destroy the separation of powers as we know it. The entire system of checks and balances depends on the idea that judges can review executive action and say no. That's Marbury v. Madison. That's 1803. That's been the law of the land for over 2 centuries. But Trump is saying that when a judge rules against him, that ruling is illegitimate because the judge wasn't elected. It's a theory that would make judicial review of presidential conduct effectively impossible. And then Chief Justice John Roberts responded. John Roberts does not do this lightly. Roberts has spent his entire career trying to keep the Supreme Court above the political fray. He's been criticized for it. He's been called weak for it. But he understands that the legitimacy of the judiciary depends on appearing impartial, on staying out of political fights. He stepped into this one anyway. Roberts issued a statement calling Trump's attack unacceptable. He said it was an assault on the independence of the courts. The Chief Justice of the United States, the leader of the entire federal judiciary, publicly rebuked the President of the United States for attacking a federal judge. Do you understand how unprecedented that is? In 2018, when Trump attacked a judge as an Obama judge, Roberts responded by saying there are no Obama judges or Trump judges, just judges. That was notable. But this is different. This is Roberts directly calling out a presidential attack on a specific judge for a specific ruling and saying it crossed a line. The escalation matters. In 2018, Trump was insulting. In 2026, he's calling for impeachment. In 2018, he was complaining about a judge's appointment. In 2026, he's saying the judge has no legitimate authority at all. And Roberts responded accordingly. Now let's talk about what actually happens if you try to impeach a federal judge for ruling against the president. Under the Constitution, federal judges serve during good behavior. That means they can only be removed through impeachment for actual misconduct. Issuing a ruling that the president disagrees with is not misconduct. Issuing a ruling that finds the president acted unlawfully is not misconduct. That's the job. Impeaching a judge for doing their job would be one of the most serious constitutional violations in American history. It would be using the impeachment power not for accountability, but for coercion. It would tell every federal judge in the country that if you rule against this president, you could lose your career. That's not an independent judiciary. That's a captured judiciary. And it's not just about impeachment. There's another dimension here that Roberts is undoubtedly aware of. The threats against federal judges have surged under Trump. Boasberg himself was swatted after his ruling. Swatting. Someone called in a fake emergency that sent armed police to his home, all because he did his job and ruled against the administration. When the president calls a judge a radical left lunatic and demands his impeachment, the people who follow that president receive a message. That judge is an enemy. That judge deserves consequences. And some of those people act on that message in ways that range from harassment to violence. Roberts' rebuke is also a response to that reality. He's saying publicly and unmistakably that this has to stop, that the judiciary will not be intimidated, that judges will keep doing their jobs regardless of what the president says about them. Now let's connect this to what's happening in Congress. Democrats have been building an impeachment case against Trump for months. We've covered this. They've been filing articles, forcing votes, building a record. They know they can't pass anything with the current Republican House majority, but every forced vote creates political material for the 2026 midterms. Every Republican who votes against impeachment has to explain that vote to their constituents, and Trump's attack on Boasberg just handed Democrats a massive piece of evidence. Because here's the argument they're making now. A president who attacks federal judges on social media and demands their impeachment for issuing rulings he disagrees with is using the power of his office to intimidate the judicial branch. That's obstruction. That's abuse of power. And it adds to a pile of evidence that is growing by the week. We already have court findings of zero law enforcement basis for politically motivated subpoenas. We have immigration court order violations. We have a Supreme Court ruling on tariffs finding that Trump claimed authority he didn't have. We have a federal judge finding that the DOJ pursued subpoenas against the Fed chair with zero evidence of crime and the motive of political intimidation. And now we have a public attack on a federal judge that the Chief Justice of the United States called unacceptable. Together, these form a comprehensive record. Democrats are assembling the most substantial impeachment case built on documented judicial and legal findings we've seen in American political history. And every Republican who votes against holding Trump accountable is on the record, every single one. And that record is going to be part of the 2026 campaign in every competitive district in the country. Let me bring this back to the Federal Reserve piece one more time, because it's easy to get lost in the constitutional drama and forget what started all this. Trump tried to use the Justice Department to pressure the Federal Reserve chair into resigning. That's what Boasberg found. The DOJ issued subpoenas with zero evidentiary basis. Zero. And the purpose, according to the judge, was political intimidation aimed at forcing Powell out so Trump could replace him with someone who would lower rates on demand. If that had worked, if Trump had succeeded, the independence of the Federal Reserve would be over. And if the Fed's independence is over, the credibility of American monetary policy takes a massive hit. The dollar's status as the world's reserve currency rests partly on the credibility of American institutions, including the Fed. Boasberg's ruling protected that independence, and for doing his job, he got called a radical lunatic and had his life threatened. That's where we are. So let's make this crystal clear. Point 1. Trump calling for Boasberg's impeachment because Boasberg ruled against him is a direct assault on judicial independence. The phrase, "did not win the election," is not a throwaway line. It's a constitutional philosophy that would nullify judicial review of executive action. If taken seriously, it destroys the separation of powers. Point 2. Roberts' response, publicly rebuking the attack as unacceptable, is the Chief Justice of the United States making an institutional statement that the judiciary will not be intimidated. That exchange between Trump and Roberts is historically significant regardless of what happens next. It's a moment when the constitutional framework was directly challenged and then publicly defended by the leader of one of its three branches. Point 3. The Powell subpoena ruling is one of the most significant judicial findings of the entire second term. Boasberg found that the administration was using the Justice Department to coerce an independent institution into bending to presidential preferences. That finding has serious implications for Federal Reserve independence, for American monetary credibility, and for the global financial system. Point 4. The Democratic impeachment push is now building on a foundation that gets stronger by the week. Months of documented executive overreach, court findings across multiple fronts, a Supreme Court ruling against the administration on tariffs, and now a public attack on a federal judge that the Chief Justice himself called unacceptable. Each of these is significant on its own. Together, they form a comprehensive record. Here's the bottom line. Judge Boasberg ruled that Trump DOJ subpoenas against Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell had zero evidentiary basis and were designed to pressure Powell to resign, protecting the independence of the Federal Reserve from executive coercion. Trump responded by calling Boasberg a radical left lunatic on social media and demanding his impeachment, writing that Boasberg did not win the election. Chief Justice Roberts publicly rebuked Trump's attack as an unacceptable assault on judicial independence. Democrats are citing the attack as additional evidence of obstruction and abuse of power. And the constitutional confrontation between the Trump administration and the federal judiciary is now at its most acute point since the start of the second term. The question is, what happens next? Does Roberts' rebuke actually change anything? Does Trump keep attacking judges regardless? Do Republicans in Congress continue to enable this behavior? And most importantly, when the 2026 midterms come, do voters remember who stood up for the rule of law and who stood by while a president tried to tear it down? We're going to keep following every single development, because this isn't over. This is barely beginning. And the next few weeks are going to reveal things about our institutions, our leaders, and our country that we've been pretending we didn't need to see.